Hello, welcome to Constituent Marking with Fred Long on Proof Text. And I'm Fred Long, and we're about to conclude 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. Whew, we got to start on it. Okay, so we're going to finish it up. But really, these sentences are not too bad. We're going to get into some real gnarly ones, and I'm even wondering how I'm going to adequately explain the grammar just because there's going to be like sentences will go on and on and on for several verses, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet. So in this case, though, we do have a continuation of subordinate clause from last time, and we'll see. Maybe I'll try to explain that a little bit. We'll have to, but let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to mark the connector, ke. Now this ke at the start of verse 10, so ke ana menin ton wion avtu ek ton uranon. So I'll just stop with that. Now what's happening here is that this is a second purpose construction, which involves just a simple infinitive. So I'm putting brackets around the extending from ana menin all the way to uranon. And uranon is part of an ek, so I can put that inside of parentheses, ek ton uranon, from heaven. Ana menin is from ana meno, which means to like await or expect. And then the tone wion is double underline as the direct object of that infinitive. And then we have an avtu, meaning his son. So the his is God's. So God's son, and the son obviously is Jesus. So far it would be and to await his son from heaven. Now, if you go back to the last video or look up 1 Thessalonians 1:9, Paul was talking about how it was reported how the Thessalonians turned to God from idols. And then the first infinitive clause there, I'll just go ahead and show you, was to serve the living and true God. Okay, so they turned to serve the living and true God. And so now we're going to get a second infinitive to await God's son from heaven, his son from heaven. And then we're going to go on from there. On. And this is a relative pronoun. You see a lot of relative pronouns starting sentences, starting their clauses. They typically do. Sometimes they'll be a part of a prepositional phrase, but you're looking for a rough breathing mark typically. That'll help identify it. And they never have a tav in the front of it, so a tav. So this is accusative, masculine accusative singular. Whom, egirin, single underline. Then I get an ek tone necron. I'll put that in parentheses. And then egirin is aorist, active, indicative, third singular. Okay, it's from egiro. Egiro means to raise up. Okay, and we're talking about resurrection from the dead. So whom he raised from the dead. Now the he here, the third singular, this is going back to God. So God is an agent here whom God raised from the dead. The whom is going back to Jesus. So these Paul is expanding, elaborating on the thought, whom he raised from the dead. And then we're going to get a big oppositional statement. Yesun, Jesus. And I'm going to go ahead and double underline that because it is going with the direct object on. So what I'm going to do here is I'll highlight the on And then we get the apposition Jesus. And so the Son, basically what's happening is the Son has a name, and the name of that Son is Jesus. Now that's that seems like not a big deal to us as believers, but for the Gentile world back in the Mediterranean world, Jesus was not known. I mean, he was becoming more and more known, but it has different names. God's Son. You could say the Christ, but Jesus is his name. Yeah. So Jesus, the one, and then so he wants to name who this Son is, Jesus. And now what follows that is an accusative from the verb. It's an accusative participle, masculine accusative singular, present middle, from ruome. Now, ruome, remember that rows in Greek, when they start a word, have a rough breathing mark. So ruome, and they always look like P's, right? The R, the row looks like a P. I wrote it like a P too, but it looks a little different. So this is a participle. It's some kind of attributive participle or substantive participle. It's a middle formed verb, to save, deliver. Really, it has more of a intensity of delivering from kind of like peril. This is, I think, a substantive participle. So what that means is that we have another appositional marker there. Jesus, namely Jesus, comma, the one delivering, and then we have the direct object of the delivering. So as participles, remember that verbs, when they're participles, they have their own direct objects, indirect objects, prepositional phrases. And so the umas there is referring to us. It's masculine accusative plural. First person pronoun, accusative plural, actually. It's not masculine or feminine. It's just first person. Delivering us. So the omenon is indeed just a middle passive participle ending. So that's a middle passive participle. It's masculine accusative singular, present. The one delivering us, and then you have ek, tes, orges, tes, erkomenes. All of this last phrase is a prepositional phrase, PP. It's a prepositional phrase. From the wrath, the coming wrath. So here we encounter another participle that is middle formed. It's also present, middle. This other one I should have put a D there. It is indeed middle formed. That's the symbol. In form, the ending is middle passive, but in parsing we put a D there. Not for deponent, but for middle formed. So this is the erkomenes is present, middle formed participle. It's feminine, genitive singular. And it's genitive singular because it's going with orges, which is genitive singular. And this repeated article here tells us that this participle is in the second attributive position. It's a slightly more marked. It's motivated. It's second attributive position for adjectives or here participles or any kind of modifier is a more marked construction from the wrath that is coming, or from the coming wrath. So the difference in translation, you can kind of hear it, right? From the coming wrath. Well, that kind of stresses the wrath, right? Or you could say from the wrath that is coming. That begins to construe more the comingness of that wrath, which is kind of interesting because 2 Thessalonians seems to be a follow-up to this issue of wrath. and, has the day of the Lord already come, and that kind of stuff. So Thessalonians is an early letter of Paul. It's early. I think Galatians may be earlier, but Thessalonians, it reads kind of more early, more earlier to me. But in sequence of time, I think Galatians typically is first. But he's talking about wrath. He's talking about judgment, and it's confusing for people. It's confusing for believers. And there's going to be a follow-up letter, and there's going to be confusion because he's like, yeah, there's letters coming from us. Don't believe them, that kind of thing. So he is laying forth that part of the message of Jesus, God's Son, that we are awaiting him. He's going to come from heaven. He's going to come and deliver us. God raised him up, and so he ascended to the right hand of God. Now, he doesn't say all this in this letter, but in early Christian understanding is he went to the right hand of God, and we're waiting him. And so we see Paul saying that here, we're waiting him. You are waiting him, Jesus, the one who is going to deliver us from the wrath that is coming. All right. So that's how I translate this verse and work through it. And so if you're hanging in there, if you're following, glad to hear that. Thanks for listening and watching, and hope to have you listen and watch next time. Take care.